What if? That's what it starts with, what you have. So jump back into the story of Elisha and the widow with me. Elisha did not say, oh, cool, you got a little bit of oil. He gives very specific and honestly some very strange instructions. He says, okay, you got a little flask of oil. Cool. All right, go get as many empty jars as you can from your friends and neighbors. And then, that's weird. What do you want me to do? Like, take my little oil and you want me to just put a drop of oil into 100 glass jars? Like, what are we doing here? I wish I had time. If I had time, I would physically demonstrate this for you, right? And I'd take a thing of, like, I'd just have a bunch of mason jars up here, and I would just put, like, a little dot in each one. And be like, you bum, right? But what did he say? If we stop there, it's a silly story. He says, take and pour oil from your flask into the other jars, setting each one aside when? When it's filled. And so she did what he said. Now, I want you to picture this scene with me, okay? We're just walking through this story. This is so funny. She's already, like, crazy broke. She's incredibly desperate. She's also mourning her dead husband, who, by the way, died apparently serving God. You know, she could have a chip on her shoulder from that. He devoted his life to the Lord, and he might be one of the prophets that was martyred that Elijah was talking about, right? And you're like, well, he died, and now what? It's God's fault that he died. You know, like, she could be wrestling with some intense stuff. And so now the woman's next step is to go get a bunch of empty jars and deal with her already empty thing of oil. And this is what's really important. The next step for her isn't about resources. It's about faith-filled obedience, right? I'm going to be silly for a moment, but it's really important that you understand what happens. Okay, I'm going to give you a silly example, but it's necessary. I want you to see what happens. How did she get the resource? How did she get the oil? The way it didn't happen is as important as the way it did happen, okay? So, like, what happened, what didn't happen was she didn't get the provision first, right? She doesn't have this cartoon moment where she's like, okay, I have this terrible situation. I'm at the end of my rope. I have just this tiny flask of oil. I have nothing at all except this little flask of oil. And then he's like, here's what didn't happen. He's not like, wiggle. And then, I don't know, like genie magics, and then, pretend like modern oil instead of ancient, like olive oil. Pretend like a geyser of crude oil erupts out of the floor of her house, right? He like has this cool genie moment, and then oil bursts out, and her house is flooding with oil, and she's like, oh no, I'm a billionaire now. Shoot, what am I going to do with all this oil flooding my house? Kids, go get some barrels from the neighbor. Let's fill this up with all the oil because we're billionaires. It's really important. I know that's super silly, but I want you to understand that the miracle didn't start with receiving, right? It didn't. She didn't start with the access. It started with pouring, right? Do you understand? The miracle started before the provision was given, right? So the oil didn't multiply when she prayed. The oil didn't multiply when she cried. The oil didn't multiply when she explained how dire her situation was. The oil multiplied when? When she gave what little she had, right? In other words, God's abundance often follows faith-filled obedience. I need you to see this, and the same might be true for us. I think we're often waiting for God to provide before we pour, right? But sometimes God is waiting for us to pour so he can provide. Let me say it this way, okay? Like, we often want provision before we'll trust God. And we're kind of like quote unquote hanging God out to dry. Like, God, I'm not going to trust you till you do this. We want God to provide before we trust, and God is looking for faith-filled obedience before he provides. So we're often getting our own way of receiving God's provision if this truth reigns in our own lives. And so the reality is God often honors faith-filled obedience with abundance, not the other way around. He doesn't let us, and by the way, if we extrapolate this and go a little bit farther, God will not tolerate us holding him for ransom, right? Like that, and if we're honest with ourselves, sometimes that's what we do with generosity. Is we're actually holding God up for ransom and saying like God, I will not until you. That sounds like a ransom letter, right? I'm not giving what's yours. Because everything we have is on loan from God. I'm not giving what's yours until you give me what I want. That's a ransom letter, right? And so keep going in the story, right? So God honors abundance with faith-filled obedience with abundance. And so you see what happens. Her sons kept bringing her jars. And she filled one after another, after another, after another. And soon every one was full to the what? To the brim. Can you imagine this? So imagine this, okay? She has nothing at all except this little flask of oil. And as she's pouring it, I can imagine, I hope you can too, every drop she poured had to feel like the last one, right? It doesn't say that hers was full. It said as she poured, the others were full, right? Every drop had to feel like the last one. Can you imagine that? And there was exactly enough provided to fill the number of jars she was willing to get. If she had less jars, it would have been done sooner. If she had more jars, it would have gone farther. She got the right amount, and the oil didn't run out until the jars did. What happened? Like God didn't ask her to pour what she didn't have. He simply asked her to pour what she did have. This is, I think, why God's economy is so different than the world's, right? In the world, we say, wait until we have enough to be generous. In the kingdom, we pour and we discover that there's more than enough. Widow's miracle didn't come from hoarding, it came from pouring. Because I believe with all my heart, we were made to pour, not store.